The unexpected encounter Elias had never imagined his journey to Zarathos would end like this. The crash was not something he could have predicted, but then again, nothing about his mission had gone according to plan. His starship, an advanced exploration vessel, was supposed to be a reliable means of travel, but now it lay in ruins on the surface of this unknown world. The stars above were strange, and the atmosphere was thick with the scent of alien flora. The planet itself was both beautiful and terrifying. The massive trees towered over him, their bark a deep purple that seemed to shimmer in the faint light of distant suns. The air was warm, but a slight chill lingered, as if the world itself was waiting for something to happen. Elias had been part of a larger intergalactic exploration mission, sent to chart the distant worlds beyond the known galaxies. But the sudden malfunction of the ship, the violent crash landing, and the sudden silence that followed had left him stranded on this alien world. Now he had no choice but to explore. As he walked through the dense forest, trying to make sense of his surroundings, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Strange noises echoed from the trees, and the movement of shadows made him uneasy. Still, he pressed on. There was no other option. His mission had only just begun, and he needed to find shelter and communication equipment to signal his crew. But what he hadn't expected, what no one could have expected, was the sight that awaited him when he stumbled into the heart of the alien city. It was a magnificent place, far beyond anything he had seen. The architecture was a mix of organic and technological elements, with towering structures that seemed to grow out of the ground, their surfaces alive with pulsating lights. The streets were wide, lined with strange plants that seemed to hum with energy. And in the center, standing on a platform surrounded by an impressive crowd, was a figure that immediately drew his attention. She was taller than any human he had ever seen, her skin a shimmering silver, and her hair a cascade of dark curls that shimmered under the strange light of the alien suns. She stood in regal silence, her eyes fixed ahead, as if waiting for something or someone. Before Elias could take another step, a group of figures dressed in elaborate metallic armor approached. They were humanoid, but their features were distinctly alien, with angular faces and sharp eyes. They moved with purpose, and Elias instinctively stepped back into the shadows. "Who is this?" one of the figures asked in a sharp, commanding voice. Elias froze, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to say. He was a human on an alien world, and his presence here could mean nothing good. But before the situation could escalate, the woman on the platform, Princess Lyra, as he would later learn, raised her hand, signaling for the guards to stop. There was something about the way she moved, the way she commanded the attention of everyone around her, that made Elias feel like he was no longer an outsider. "Who is he?" the queen asked, her voice deep and filled with authority. Her eyes locked onto Elias, narrowing with suspicion. It was clear she didn't expect anyone from his world to be here. Elias stood frozen, caught between fear and curiosity. How could he answer? Should he lie or should he tell the truth? Before he could form the words, the princess spoke again. "He is my human partner," she said, her voice calm and steady, with an air of finality. The queen's gaze shifted from the princess to Elias, her expression unreadable. The guards behind the queen tensed, clearly unsure of how to react. The tension in the air thickened, and Elias could feel his heart race. This wasn't just an innocent mistake. The princess had just made a declaration that could have severe consequences. The entire court fell silent. Elias tried to process what had just happened. The princess had just claimed him as her partner. The words were simple, but the weight they carried was immense. It wasn't just a casual declaration. It was a challenge to the authority of the queen. And for the first time in his life, Elias realized that the fate of his entire mission, and possibly his life, now hung in the balance. The queen's face remained unreadable, but her eyes flashed with something darker. It was clear that this was no ordinary courtship, no simple political move. The princess had just made a bold and dangerous statement. The queen took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice low and controlled. "You human have no place here," she said, her eyes locked onto Elias. "You are a mere outsider, and yet my daughter has decided to make you her partner. Do you have any idea what that means?" Elias didn't know how to respond. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to get out of this without a fight. The queen's anger was palpable, and the princess's calm demeanor did nothing to reassure him. But before the queen could say anything more, Princess Lyra stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Ilia's. "You will not harm him," she said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "He is under my protection now. If you wish to challenge that, you will have to go through me." The queen's gaze flickered, a mixture of anger and disbelief flashing across her features. It was rare for the princess to defy her in such a public setting. The court murmured in surprise, and Ilias could feel the tension building. Ilias wasn't sure what to do, but he knew one thing: this was no ordinary encounter. The alien queen's disdain for him was clear, and yet the princess stood by him, unwavering. It was a dangerous situation, and Ilias was unsure whether the princess's protection would be enough to keep him safe in this foreign world. But one thing was for sure: Ilias had just become a pawn in a much larger game than he had ever imagined. The tension in the air was thick, and Ilias could feel the weight of the queen's gaze pressing down on him. The princess, Lyra, stood beside him, her calm demeanor the only thing that seemed to hold the situation together. Despite the queen's fury, the princess remained composed, as though she were prepared for this very moment. Ilias, on the other hand, was anything but prepared. He had been thrust into the middle of a political storm, and he had no idea how to navigate it. For a moment, no one moved. The court was silent, waiting for the next move, the next word. Ilias shifted uncomfortably, his boots clicking softly against the polished stone floor. He could feel every eye in the room on him, each one filled with suspicion and curiosity. It was hard to breathe under such scrutiny. Finally, the queen spoke again, her voice colder than before. "Do you understand the consequences of this, my daughter?" she asked, her eyes never leaving Princess Lyra. "You have chosen to stand with this human, to claim him as your partner, and you do so in front of the entire court. This is not just a personal decision, it affects the very foundation of our kingdom." Lyra did not flinch. "I understand perfectly, mother. I have made my decision, and I stand by it." The queen's face tightened with anger. Her eyes flickered back to Ilias, and he could feel the weight of her gaze like a physical force. It was as if she could see right through him, as though she were trying to measure his worth, to determine just how dangerous he truly was. "You speak of trust," the queen continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But trust is earned, not given. What makes you think that this human, this stranger, can be trusted? He has done nothing to prove his loyalty to us." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes never leaving her mother's. "He has shown more loyalty than many of our own kind. He has risked his life to help others, to explore the unknown. He does not seek power, he only seeks knowledge. That is a quality that is rare in any species." The queen looked at her daughter with disdain. "Knowledge, yes, but at what cost? Do you think he will simply walk away when things get difficult? Do you think he will remain loyal to you when the time comes to choose between you and his own kind?" Ilias could feel the coldness in the queen's words, and it made him uneasy. He had been an explorer all his life, traveling to distant worlds, meeting new species, and seeking out knowledge. But now, in the face of such hostility, he wasn't sure what to say. The queen's words were cutting, and he didn't have the answers she was looking for. All he knew was that he hadn't come here to make enemies. He hadn't come here to fight for control or power. He just wanted to survive, and perhaps, just perhaps, make a difference. "I didn't come here to take sides," Ilias said, his voice steady despite the anxiety swirling in his chest. "I'm not here to claim anything. I'm just trying to understand your world, to help in any way I can." The queen's eyes narrowed. "Understand?" "Help," she laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You think you can just walk in and understand us? You think you can just help as if we need you? You are a human, small, fragile, and insignificant. Your kind is nothing more than a fleeting speck in the grand scheme of things." Ilias swallowed hard. The queen's words stung, but he didn't let them show. He had faced worse insults before from other species, but none of them had felt as personal as this. None of them had come from a queen. The princess, however, wasn't so easily deterred. She stepped forward again, her voice unwavering. "Mother, I have chosen Ilias because he is different," she said, her eyes meeting the queen's. "He is not like the others. He is not like the rest of his kind. He is loyal, brave, and compassionate. Those are qualities that I value above all else, and I trust him." The queen's gaze flickered to Ilias for a moment, her expression unreadable. It was clear she wasn't convinced, but she said nothing. She simply turned her back and began to walk away, signaling for the court to follow. Ilias stood there, watching as the queen's entourage moved away, her eyes lingering on him for a brief moment before they disappeared into the shadows. It felt like an eternity before the last of the courtiers had left and the room was finally quiet. Lyra turned to him then, her face softening. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "My mother can be harsh, but she will come around. It's just going to take some time." Ilias nodded, though he wasn't sure he believed her. The queen had made it clear that he wasn't welcome here, and Lyra's trust in him, though comforting, wasn't enough to change that. He knew he had to earn the queen's respect, but how? How could he possibly prove himself in a world so different from his own? As they walked through the corridors of the palace, Lyra spoke again. "I know this is difficult for you," she said, "but I want you to understand something. You are not just here as an outsider. You are important. The knowledge you bring, the experiences you have, those are things that can change our world, and I believe you are the key to something greater." Ilias glanced at her, unsure of how to respond. She was so confident in her words, so certain of what she believed, and yet he couldn't help but feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. "What do you mean?" he asked. "How can I possibly help with something so big? I'm just a human, Lyra." "I don't have the answers." "You don't need to have all the answers," she said. "But you have something that the rest of us don't, your perspective. You see the world in a way that none of us can, and that is why you are important." Ilias wasn't sure if he believed her, but he didn't have much time to think about it. The palace was alive with whispers, and it was clear that the court was divided. Some saw his presence as a threat, while others seemed to think he was a symbol of hope. It was hard to know who to trust, and Ilias didn't want to make any more enemies. He just wanted to survive, to make it through this strange new world alive. As they reached the royal chambers, Lyra paused and turned to him. "Stay close," she said. "There is much more to this world than you can imagine, and soon you will have a choice to make, a choice that could change everything." Ilias didn't know what she meant, but as he looked into her eyes, he realized that this wasn't just about survival anymore. There was something deeper at play here, something that would test not just his strength, but his resolve. And he wasn't sure he was ready for it. The days following the queen's departure from the courtroom were tense. Ilias could feel it in the air, like a storm was brewing on the horizon. Despite Princess Lyra's reassurances, he knew that the conflict between the queen and the princess was far from over. In the days since that fateful moment, the palace had been alive with whispers and rumors. The courtiers had begun to take sides, some supporting the queen, others rallying behind the princess. Ilias was caught in the middle, an unwelcome guest in a world that was not his own. Princess Lyra had been his only ally in this strange land, and though her presence was comforting, Ilias couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The queen's disdain for him had not waned, and in the silence of the palace, Ilias knew that things were only going to get more complicated from here. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the alien landscape, Lyra took Ilias to a secluded part of the palace. The room was bathed in soft, ethereal light, the walls lined with intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change as they moved past. It was a quiet, peaceful place, far from the noise and tension that had consumed the rest of the palace. "You wanted to know more about our world," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Now is your chance." Ilias nodded, intrigued. He had been on this world for days now, but there was so much he didn't understand. The alien technology, the politics, the culture, it was all so different from anything he had ever known. He had been trained to explore distant worlds, but nothing had prepared him for this. Lyra motioned to a table at the center of the room, where a holographic display flickered to life. The image that appeared was of the entire planet, a swirling mix of blue oceans, green forests, and towering cities. But there was something else, a strange, jagged scar running across the landscape, as if something had torn the world apart. "This is Zarathos," Lyra began, her eyes fixed on the hologram. "This is where we live, but this is what we are fighting against." Ilias leaned closer, studying the scar. It stretched across the planet's surface, cutting through mountains and forests alike. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before, a wound that seemed to pulse with energy. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. Lyra hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's the heart of Zarathos. It's where the conflict began." Ilias raised an eyebrow. "Conflict?" Lyra nodded. "For centuries our people lived in peace, but then a faction within our own government discovered the heart. They believed that it held the key to unlocking immense power, power that could give them control over everything. They were wrong. The heart is not a source of power, it is a curse. The image flickered again, and Elias saw a series of events unfold. Aliens fighting, cities burning, the heart growing larger and more unstable. The land was torn apart, the once beautiful planet ravaged by the greed of a few. The heart is destroying our world, Lyra continued. And the people who control it want to use it to destroy everything else. Elias looked at her, a mix of disbelief and understanding in his eyes. And you want to stop them? Lyra's eyes met his, and for the first time he saw a flicker of vulnerability behind the calm facade. I don't just want to stop them, I have to. If the heart is not destroyed, it will consume everything. And I can't let that happen. Elias didn't know what to say. He had been trained for exploration, not for saving entire worlds. But as he looked at Lyra, standing before him with the weight of her world on her shoulders, he realized that he couldn't walk away. Not now. You're not alone in this, he said quietly. I'll help you. I don't know how, but I will. Lyra smiled, the faintest hint of relief in her expression. I knew you would. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and strategy. Lyra and Elias worked together to devise a plan to stop the heart from destroying the planet. But it wasn't just a matter of destroying it. The heart was protected by powerful forces, both political and military. The Queen, as much as she despised Elias, would stop at nothing to maintain control over it. Lyra had gathered a small group of loyal supporters, those who had seen the truth of the heart's danger and were willing to risk everything to stop it. But the numbers were small, and the opposition was vast. The Queen's forces were stronger, more organized. And despite Lyra's determination, Elias knew that they were outmatched. One night, as they sat in the war room, surrounded by holographic maps and strategic plans, Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever faced, and he wasn't sure they could win. But then he looked at Lyra, her eyes focused and determined, and he realized something. This wasn't just about saving a planet. It was about something deeper. It was about standing up against the forces of greed and destruction, about fighting for a future that wasn't written in the stars. How do we do this? Elias asked, breaking the silence. Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then slowly she stood and walked to the holographic display, where the heart's image still flickered ominously. She raised a hand, and the image shifted, showing a path leading directly to the heart. We go to the source, she said, her voice steady. We infiltrate the heart of their power and destroy the heart before it can destroy us. Elias nodded, a sense of purpose filling him. It was risky, it was dangerous, and it could end in disaster. But it was the only chance they had, and so they prepared. The final battle was coming, and Elias knew that it would test everything he had. But no matter what happened, he would stand by Lyra's side. They had become more than just allies, they had become partners, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead.